When I took 3 weeks of medical leave for what I told my colleagues was a routine procedure, I never imagined it would cost me my job. I had anonymously donated my kidney to save a dying teenager, but my CEO, Marcus Blackwell, saw my absence as disloyalty during our biggest merger. He fired me for lack of commitment without knowing I had saved his own son's life. What happened when our HR director discovered the truth in my medical records would transform our company forever and teach a ruthless boss that some things matter more than profit margins. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now, let's dive into today's story. Elena Rodriguez had been the first person to arrive at Blackwell & Associates Financial every morning for 3 years running, her keycard beeping through the lobby turnstiles at 6:47 a.m. with clockwork precision. She was often the last to leave as well, her desk lamp glowing long after the executive floor had gone dark. As she finished reports that could have waited until tomorrow, but that she preferred to complete while the details were fresh in her mind. At 28, Elena had carved out a quiet reputation as the most reliable accounts assistant in the firm's history. She had never called in sick, never missed a deadline, and never complained about the entry-level salary that barely covered her small apartment rent and her cat Beethoven's veterinary bills. While her colleagues grumbled about workload and compensation, Elena simply did her job with the kind of quiet dedication that management took for granted and co-workers found both admirable and slightly mysterious. Elena's kindness extended far beyond her job description. She remembered every colleague's birthday, brought coffee to the overnight security guards, and stayed late to help overwhelmed co-workers meet their deadlines without being asked. She had a gift for remembering personal details, asking about children's soccer games, congratulating people on anniversaries, checking on colleagues who seemed stressed or upset. "Why don't you ask for a raise?" her desk neighbor Amanda would ask periodically. "You work harder than people making twice your salary." Elena's answer was always the same, delivered with a gentle smile that suggested deeper convictions. Some things are more important than money. Her colleagues found Elena's philosophy refreshing but puzzling. In a company culture driven by bonuses and advancement, her contentment with modest circumstances and focus on helping others seemed almost antiquated. But her genuine warmth and reliability had earned her respect throughout the organization, from junior analysts to senior partners who had learned to trust her judgment and depend on her follow-through. Elena lived alone in a studio apartment in Queens, her most valued companion being Beethoven, a rescued tabby cat who had been hit by a car and left with a permanent limp. She had found him outside the subway station 2 years earlier, paid for his expensive surgery with her savings, and nursed him back to health with the same patient dedication she brought to everything else in her life. Her social life was limited but intentional. Elena volunteered at a local food bank on weekends, attended evening classes in nonprofit management at the community college, and maintained a small circle of close friends who shared her values of service and simplicity. She rarely talked about her personal life at work, not out of unfriendliness, but because she believed in maintaining appropriate boundaries between her professional and private worlds. What none of her colleagues knew was that for the past 6 months, Elena had been leaving work early every Thursday afternoon. She told anyone who asked that she had joined a yoga class, which was technically true. She had indeed started practicing yoga as part of a comprehensive health preparation program. But the real reason for her Thursday absences was far more significant and entirely private. Elena had registered as a potential kidney donor with the National Kidney Registry after reading about the critical shortage of organ donors and the thousands of people dying while waiting for transplants. The Thursday appointments were for the extensive medical testing, psychological evaluations, and health assessments required for potential living donors. The process was rigorous and invasive, involving blood work, imaging studies, meetings with social workers, and consultations with nephrologists who needed to ensure that Elena understood the risks and was making an informed decision. Elena approached the evaluation process with the same methodical thoroughness she brought to her work, researching every aspect of kidney donation and preparing her body for surgery with dietary changes, exercise, and meditation. When the call came in September that a compatible recipient had been found, Elena felt a mixture of nervousness and profound purpose. She had never expected to match so quickly, and the reality of surgery suddenly felt both daunting and inevitable. The recipient was described only as a teenage patient in critical condition, and Elena preferred to keep the details anonymous. She wanted her donation to be an act of pure altruism, uncomplicated by personal connection or expectation of gratitude. On a Monday morning in October, Elena approached her supervisor Nathan with careful preparation and some anxiety. Nathan had always been supportive of her work, but requesting 3 weeks of medical leave during their busiest season felt like an imposition she hoped wouldn't damage their professional relationship. "I need to request medical leave for a surgical procedure," Elena explained, handing Nathan the documentation her doctors had provided. "It's nothing life-threatening, but the recovery time is important for avoiding complications." Nathan reviewed the paperwork, which described the leave as necessary for elective surgery with extended recovery period. The medical forms were properly completed and signed, though they provided minimal details about the specific procedure. 3 weeks is a significant amount of time, Nathan said thoughtfully. "Is there any flexibility in the timing? We're in the middle of the Morrison merger, and your analytical work has been crucial to the financial projections." "I understand the timing isn't ideal," Elena replied, "but the surgical schedule isn't flexible, and my doctor emphasized that rushing the recovery could lead to serious complications. I'm committed to working remotely during the final week if I'm feeling well enough." Given Elena's perfect attendance record and exemplary performance, Nathan approved the leave without hesitation. "Take the time you need to heal properly," he said. "We'll manage the workload while you're gone, and we'll be glad to have you back at full capacity." Elena felt a surge of gratitude for Nathan's understanding, though she wished she could explain the true significance of her absence. She was donating a kidney to save a stranger's life, but the confidential nature of organ donation meant she had to accept being perceived as someone taking time off for a routine procedure. The surgery itself went perfectly. Elena woke up in the recovery room with the knowledge that her kidney was already functioning in its new recipient, filtering toxins and producing urine that would keep a teenager alive. The physical pain was manageable, but the emotional satisfaction was profound. She had given someone else the chance for a normal life, and she had done it without expecting anything in return. The 3 weeks of recovery passed slowly in Elena's small apartment. Beethoven seemed to sense her vulnerability and spent most of his time curled up next to her, purring with the steady rhythm that helped her sleep through the discomfort. Elena read extensively, caught up on movies she had missed, and gradually increased her activity level according to her surgeon's instructions. She maintained minimal contact with her office during recovery, checking emails occasionally, but avoiding any work that required extensive concentration. Nathan checked in weekly with brief, supportive messages, and Amanda sent care packages with homemade soup and trashy magazines that made Elena laugh despite her surgical pain. When Elena returned to work 3 weeks later, she moved more carefully than usual and tired more easily, but she was grateful to resume her normal routine. Her colleagues welcomed her back warmly, though several noticed she seemed to be taking pain medication more frequently than someone recovering from routine surgery typically would. "How's your back feeling?" Amanda asked, noticing Elena wince as she sat down at her desk. Better every day, Elena replied diplomatically. The doctor said full recovery takes a few months, but I'm making good progress. Elena had decided to attribute her ongoing discomfort to back problems rather than explain the reality of kidney donation recovery. She wanted to return to normal as quickly as possible, and she knew that revealing the true nature of her surgery would lead to questions and attention she preferred to avoid. Unfortunately, Elena's return to work coincided with the most stressful period in CEO Marcus Blackwell's professional life. The Morrison merger had become increasingly complicated, with regulatory challenges, financial complications, and board pressure that had him working 18-hour days and sleeping in his office more nights than he went home. Marcus Blackwell had built his financial services company through aggressive expansion and ruthless efficiency. He demanded the same dedication from his employees that he gave to the business, and he had little patience for what he perceived as weakness or divided loyalty. In recent weeks, his stress had manifested as harsh criticism of employees and impossible standards that had already led to 3 terminations for minor infractions. What none of his employees knew was that Marcus was carrying a burden far heavier than any business challenge. For the past year, his 16-year-old son Tyler had been dying of kidney failure, surviving on dialysis while waiting for a transplant that might never come. The disease had progressed rapidly, and Tyler's doctors had warned that without a new kidney soon, the teenager might not live to see his 17th birthday. 2 weeks before Elena's return to work, a miracle had occurred. An anonymous donor had been found, Tyler had received his transplant, and the surgery had been successful beyond the doctor's most optimistic projections. Tyler was recovering well, his new kidney functioning perfectly, and his prognosis had changed from terminal to completely normal. But despite this answered prayer, Marcus remained consumed by anxiety about the merger and unable to process his relief about his son's recovery. His emotional exhaustion manifested as increased irritability and impossible demands on his staff, creating an atmosphere of fear and resentment that permeated the entire organization. On Elena's second day back from medical leave, Marcus's assistant called her office with a message that made her stomach drop. "Mr. Blackwell wants to see you in his office immediately. Please bring your personnel file." Elena had never been called to the CEO's office, and the formal tone of the message suggested serious consequences. She gathered her documents with shaking hands and took the elevator to the executive floor, where Marcus's assistant directed her to wait in the conference room adjacent to his corner office. Marcus entered the room, flanked by Rebecca Santos from Human Resources, his expression cold and businesslike. Elena had worked for the company for 3 years, but had never spoken directly with the CEO, and his intimidating presence made her feel like a child being called to the principal's office. "Elena Rodriguez," Marcus said without preamble, consulting a folder in front of him. "You've been with the company for 3 years as an accounts assistant." "Yes, sir," Elena replied, unsure whether this was a question or a statement. "Your recent 3-week absence has raised questions about your commitment to this organization," Marcus continued. "We're in the middle of our most important merger, and your decision to take extended personal time during this critical period suggests that you don't understand the dedication this company requires." Elena felt her heart racing. "Sir, my leave was approved through proper channels, and I provided all the required medical documentation. I worked remotely during my final week of recovery, and I've been back at full capacity since my return." Marcus waved dismissively at her objections. "The timing of your absence demonstrates poor judgment and questionable priorities. At Blackwell & Associates, we need people who put the job first, especially during crucial periods like this merger." Rebecca Santos looked uncomfortable, but remained silent as Marcus delivered his verdict. "We're terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay and security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Elena sat in stunned silence, unable to process the injustice of being fired for taking approved medical leave to save someone's life. She wanted to explain the true reason for her absence, to make Marcus understand that her questionable priorities had involved saving a dying teenager, but the confidential nature of organ donation prevented her from defending herself. "I understand," Elena said quietly, though she understood nothing about the cruelty of being punished for anonymous heroism. News of Elena's termination spread through the office within hours, shocking colleagues who considered her a model employee. Amanda was particularly outraged, telling anyone who would listen that firing Elena was the most unfair thing this company has ever done. But with Marcus's recent pattern of harsh terminations, no one dared to openly question his decision. Unknown to everyone at Blackwell and Associates, Marcus's son Tyler was recovering in their penthouse apartment, his color returning daily as his new kidney restored his health. Marcus visited Tyler every evening after work, marveling at the transformation in his son's energy and outlook. Tyler had gone from being bedridden and hopeless to planning his return to school and talking about college applications. "Dad, you seem happier," Tyler observed one evening as they played chess, a game that had been impossible during the worst of his illness. "Is it just because I'm better, or is work going well too?" Marcus considered the question. "Work is incredibly stressful right now, but yes, seeing you healthy again makes everything else manageable. I keep thinking about the person who donated their kidney to you. I'll never be able to thank them, but I pray for them every night." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Me too. The doctors said the donor was around your age, probably someone with their own family and responsibilities. I can't imagine someone making that sacrifice for a stranger. It was the most generous thing anyone has ever done for our family," Marcus replied. "I just hope they know how grateful we are." While Marcus was expressing gratitude for his anonymous benefactor, Rebecca Santos in Human Resources was processing Elena's termination paperwork and struggling with a nagging sense that something wasn't right. Elena's medical documentation had been properly completed, but the timing and vague nature of the procedure struck Rebecca as unusual for someone taking 3 weeks of recovery time. Rebecca's sister Carmen worked as a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital, and during their weekly dinner, Rebecca found herself sharing her concerns about Elena's termination. "It just seems wrong," Rebecca explained. "She was the most dedicated employee we had, never caused any problems, and then she gets fired for taking approved medical leave. The timing was bad for the company, but that's not her fault." Carmen listened thoughtfully as Rebecca described the situation. "What kind of surgery required 3 weeks of recovery?" she asked. "The documentation just said elective procedure with extended recovery period," Rebecca replied. "It was all very vague, which I guess is normal for medical privacy." Carmen's expression became more interested. 3 weeks of recovery, elective but medically necessary. "Rebecca, do you remember what I told you about the incredible kidney donation case we had a few weeks ago?" Rebecca felt a chill of recognition. "The anonymous donor who saved that teenager's life?" "Exactly. The donor was a young woman, probably late 20s, who donated to a 16-year-old boy from a wealthy family. The surgery was about 3 weeks ago, and the recovery time was exactly 3 weeks. The donor chose to remain completely anonymous, even from the recipient's family." The pieces began falling into place in Rebecca's mind. "Carmen, I need you to look at something, but I need your promise that this conversation never happened." Rebecca showed Carmen Elena's medical documentation, and Carmen immediately recognized the timeline and hospital coding. "Rebecca, I think your employee was the kidney donor who saved that boy's life. The dates match perfectly, and the recovery timeline is exactly right for kidney donation." Rebecca felt sick to her stomach. If Elena donated her kidney to save someone's life, and we fired her for taking time off to recover, That's not just unfair, it's monstrous. There's more, Carmen said quietly. The recipient was Tyler Blackwell. As in Blackwell family, I remember the name because it was unusual, and the boy's father was listed as Marcus Blackwell in the insurance information. Rebecca stared at her sister in disbelief. Elena was fired by the father of the boy whose life she saved? Marcus Blackwell fired his son's anonymous kidney donor for lack of commitment? Carmen nodded grimly. If I'm right, your boss just fired the woman who answered his prayers and saved his child's life. Rebecca spent a sleepless night wrestling with the ethical implications of what she had discovered. Revealing Elena's private medical information could cost Rebecca her job and violate federal privacy laws. But the injustice of Elena's termination and the profound irony of the situation made inaction feel equally wrong. By morning, Rebecca had decided that some principles were more important than job security. Elena's words from her going-away party echoed in her mind. Some things are more important than money. Rebecca requested an urgent meeting with Marcus Blackwell, her hands shaking as she carried the documents that would change everything. Marcus looked annoyed at the interruption to his morning schedule, but Rebecca's pale, determined expression suggested something serious. "Mr. Blackwell," Rebecca began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I need to show you something about Elena Rodriguez's medical leave." She placed the hospital documentation on Marcus's desk, along with her sister's professional verification of the timeline and procedure codes. Elena wasn't taking time off for a routine procedure. She was donating her kidney to save a dying teenager's life. Marcus's face went pale as he read the documents. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Elena Rodriguez was the anonymous donor who saved Tyler's life," Rebecca said, quietly. "She took 3 weeks off work to undergo surgery that gave your son a second chance at life, and you fired her for lack of commitment." The color drained completely from Marcus's face as the full impact of Rebecca's revelation hit him. The anonymous angel he had been praying for, the selfless stranger whose sacrifice had saved his son, was the dedicated employee he had cruelly terminated for taking approved medical leave. "Oh God," Marcus whispered, sinking into his chair. "What have I done?" That evening, Marcus sat in Tyler's room and tearfully confessed everything to his son and wife. Tyler, whose life had been saved by Elena's kidney, was devastated to learn that his donor had been punished for her generosity. "Dad, you have to make this right," Tyler said urgently. "This woman saved my life, and you fired her for it. You have to find her and fix this." Marcus spent the night staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by guilt and desperate to repair the damage he had caused. At dawn, he looked up Elena's home address and drove to her apartment building, his expensive suit wrinkled from a sleepless night and his usual confidence replaced by profound remorse. Elena was scrolling through online job listings when her doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole and was shocked to see Marcus Blackwell standing in her hallway, looking disheveled and emotional. "Mr. Blackwell?" Elena said cautiously as she opened the door. "What are you doing here? May I come in?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I need to ask you something important." Elena led him into her small living room, where Beethoven observed the unexpected visitor with typical feline suspicion. Marcus sat heavily on her couch, looking around at her modest furnishings with new eyes. "Elena," Marcus began, his voice cracking slightly, "did you donate a kidney at Mount Sinai Hospital 3 weeks ago?" Elena's face went white. Her donation was supposed to be completely confidential, and she couldn't understand how Marcus had discovered her secret. "How did you—" "Please," Marcus interrupted, "I need to know. Did you donate your kidney to save a 16-year-old boy?" Elena nodded slowly, still confused about how her privacy had been breached. "Yes, but I don't understand how you found out," The donation was supposed to be anonymous. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Elena a photo of Tyler in his hospital bed, smiling despite the surgical equipment surrounding him. "This is my son, Tyler. He received your kidney, Elena. You saved my son's life." Elena stared at the photo, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. "Tyler is your son? I fired you for taking time off to save my son's life," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "I fired you for the most generous, selfless act of your life. I've been praying every night to thank the anonymous donor who saved Tyler, and all this time, it was you." Elena felt overwhelmed by the revelation, but her dominant emotion was compassion for Marcus's obvious anguish. "I never knew who would receive my kidney," she said gently. "I just knew that someone's child needed it, and I could help." "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked. "When I was firing you, why didn't you explain what you had done?" Elena's answer was simple and devastating. "I didn't donate my kidney to keep my job, Mr. Blackwell. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I didn't think you would believe me even if I had tried to explain." Marcus realized that Elena's assessment was probably accurate. In his stressed state, he likely would have dismissed her explanation as a desperate lie. The knowledge that he had been too closed-minded to recognize the heroism of the woman sitting across from him made his guilt even more profound. "I've made a terrible mistake," Marcus said. "More than a mistake, I've committed an injustice that I don't know how to repair. You saved my son's life, and I repaid your sacrifice with cruelty and unemployment." Elena studied Marcus's face, seeing genuine remorse and transformation in his expression. "What matters is that Tyler is healthy," she said. "That's why I donated my kidney. Not for recognition or job security, but because everyone deserves a chance at life." The conversation lasted for 3 hours, during which Marcus learned about Elena's values, her dedication to service, and her philosophy that some things were indeed more important than money. He also learned about her financial struggles since the termination and her difficulty finding new employment during her ongoing recovery. By the end of their conversation, Marcus had developed a profound respect for Elena that went far beyond gratitude for saving Tyler's life. He had discovered an employee whose character and values represented everything he wanted his company to embody. Elena returned to Blackwell & Associates not as an accounts assistant, but as the director of a newly created employee welfare department, with a mandate to ensure that acts of service and dedication were recognized and supported rather than punished. Her first initiative was establishing a foundation to support employees who chose to become organ donors, providing paid leave and medical coverage for the donation process. The company's medical leave policy was rewritten to become the most generous in the financial services industry, with explicit protections for employees who chose to help others through medical donations or volunteer service. Elena worked with medical professionals to create educational programs about organ donation, and Blackwell & Associates became the first major financial firm to actively encourage and support employee participation in life-saving medical procedures. A plaque in the company lobby read, "Sometimes the greatest acts of dedication happen outside the office," accompanied by a photo of Elena and Tyler at a charity run, both wearing "Share Your Spare" t-shirts and smiling with the joy of people who understood the value of second chances. Marcus Blackwell was transformed by his encounter with Elena's selflessness. Every year on the anniversary of Tyler's transplant, he gathered the entire company to remind them that business success meant nothing without human compassion. Elena's example had taught him that true leadership meant recognizing and nurturing the best qualities in people, even when those qualities were expressed quietly and without expectation of reward. Elena continued to live modestly with Beethoven, but her new position allowed her to expand her impact beyond individual acts of kindness to systemic changes that supported service and compassion throughout the organization. When people asked why she had donated her kidney to a stranger, her answer remained beautifully simple: because everyone deserves a chance, even the boss's son. The story of Elena's sacrifice and Marcus's transformation became legendary within the company and throughout the financial services industry. It demonstrated that the most valuable employees were often those whose greatest contributions happened away from spreadsheets and conference rooms, in moments of quiet heroism that revealed the true measure of human character. Tyler Blackwell grew up to become a doctor specializing in kidney disease, inspired by Elena's gift, and dedicated to expanding access to organ transplantation for patients regardless of their ability to pay. His annual Christmas card to Elena always included the same message: "Thank you for giving me the chance to help others the way you helped me." And Marcus Blackwell learned that the best business decisions weren't always about profit margins and efficiency metrics. Sometimes they were about recognizing the extraordinary people who walk among us, performing miracles without fanfare, and transforming lives through simple acts of human decency. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.